Okay, hello Cloud Gurus and welcome to this lecture. In this lecture, we're going to look at cross-region replication. So this is a lab and you will need to log into the AWS console. Okay, so here I am in the AWS console. If we go over to S3, it's always under storage. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create our destination bucket. So what we want to do is replicate all our objects from this bucket, my version control demo, over to a new bucket, and we'll put it in a different region. So let's call it my replication bucket, and then Tokyo ACG 12345. Hopefully that will be a unique name. And I'm going to put this in Tokyo, surprise, surprise. And in here, I'm going to untick block all public access settings because I want to be able to see whether or not the replication is working correctly. And we're going to acknowledge that that's fine. In here, bucket versioning, I'm going to leave it as disabled, and you'll see why in a second. We'll leave everything else as default, and we'll go ahead and create our bucket. So that has now created our bucket. I'm just going to close this, and we can see our bucket in here, my replication bucket Tokyo ACG. If we go into our original bucket with version control, if you remember, we've got two different versions. So we have version 1, we deleted version 2, and then this is version 3, and you can see it's slightly bigger because we added the line of text. This is the final version. And then what we want to do is we want to go over to management, and here we can see our lifecycle rules that we did earlier. And if we scroll down, we can see our replication rules under here, and we don't have any replication rules. So let's go ahead and create a replication rule. I'm going to call this rule replicate to Japan. In here, we can choose our IAM role. If you haven't created one before, then just go ahead and create a new role. You can see here I was doing a demo a little bit earlier, but I broke something, so I have to redo it. But there is a role for cross-region replication in there, but that's only because I've created it before. So I'm just going to create a new role. And down here, we've got our source bucket. So again, similarly to what we were doing with lifecycle rules, we can do it either to just some objects, depending on a filter, or we can do it to all objects in the bucket. That's what I'm going to do to all objects in the bucket. And in here, we've got our destination. So do we want to choose a bucket in this account, or do we want to choose a bucket in another AWS account? Let's go ahead and browse S3, and we're going to select our replication bucket Tokyo ACG 12345. And you can see here right away it says replication requires versioning to be enabled for the destination bucket. So we must have versioning turned on in our destination bucket in order for cross-region replication to work. So let's go ahead and enable bucket replication. That can be a very popular exam topic, by the way, so do remember that going into your exams. In here we can change the storage class for our replicated objects. So we can say, hey, instead of it being standard, let's make it standard infrequently accessed, or one zone IA, or reduce redundancy, or intelligent tiering, or glacier, or whatever. I'm going to do standard IA. Here we've got replication time control, and this basically guarantees it's going to replicate 99.99% of your new objects within 15 minutes. I'm going to leave that off. And here we've got replication metrics and events, and this basically allows you to monitor it through CloudWatch metrics. We don't need to do that. We'll just leave everything as default. We can replicate objects encrypted with AWS KMS if we wanted, and we can also replicate our delete markers. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to leave everything as default. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And that has now created our replication rule. So what do you think has happened to our objects that are in our current bucket? Do you think they've been replicated across? So these objects here, my document.txt version 3 and version 1, do you think they've already been replicated across to our bucket in Japan? Well, let's go in and have a look. And the answer is no, they haven't. Now, what happens with replication, cross-region replication, is it only starts working the moment you turn it on. It doesn't take the objects that are already in your bucket and replicate them across when you turn it on. It only does it for all new objects from that point in time forward. So do remember that going into your exam as well. So what we want to do is we want to go in and add a new version of our document. So we're going to go in here, and I'm just going to go in and I'm going to update my document.txt. So I'm in my document.txt. I'm going to call this version 4. I'm going to say this is the final version. Go ahead and save that. And I'm back in the console, and we're going to go and upload that file. So let's go ahead and add that file, mydocument.txt. You see it's version 4, the final version. Let's go ahead and hit upload, and that has now uploaded. If we go in and hit exit, we should be able to see 3 different versions. So there it is. We've got our 19-byte, 47-byte, and our 53-byte file. If we tried to click on this and have a look at it, of course, we won't be able to see it because we haven't made it public. Let's go ahead and make it public as well. So if we go back in here, we'll make this object public and go to Actions, Make Public, and Make Public. And now we should be able to see it when we go in. So if we click on our document and then go over to here and click on our object, we can now see that it is now public. So let's see if it has replicated across. And do you think that is it replicated all the previous versions as well? Or do you think it's just the new version that's been replicated across to our bucket? And also, what do you think has happened to the public permissions? Do you think when I changed it in the source bucket, it's changed it in the destination bucket? Well, let's go ahead and have a look. So if we go into our destination bucket, that has definitely replicated across. You can see it's a 53-byte file. Let's have a look at our version history. And you can see it's only the newest version that's been replicated across. So it did not replicate all previous versions either. And if we go in here and click on it, surprise, surprise, we're not going to be able to view it because we haven't made it public in our destination bucket. So we can do that if we want, but I'm not going to bother. But I just want to show you that if you change the permissions of an object in the source bucket, it does not change those permissions in the destination bucket. So bear that in mind going into your exam as well. And that's how cross-region replication works. And the cool thing about cross-region replication is you can do it between buckets in the same AWS account, but you can also do it for buckets in different AWS accounts. And a typical use case of where you would do this is, let's say you've got all your log files for, let's say, like a VPC or CloudWatch or whatever it is you're logging inside your AWS environment. It all comes into a bucket in S3 in that production account. You can then set up a rule so that that's replicated across to another AWS account in S3, and that people in your production account can't access it in the second account. So you could have that as your audit account. And then that way, if people are going in and changing logs in the production account, if something dodgy is going on, you have a record of all the original data in the secondary account. And we cover that off in the certified security specialty in a lot more detail. So that is it for this one. Let's go ahead and have a look at my exam tips. And so on to my exam tips. Remember that versioning must be enabled on both the source and the destination buckets in order for replication to work. Remember that files in an existing bucket are not replicated automatically, and we saw that in our lab. We have to add new files. All subsequent or updated files will be replicated automatically. Delete markers are not replicated, and then deleting individual versions or delete markers will also not be replicated. And then just understand what cross-region replication is at a high level. So that is it for this lecture, everyone. If you have any questions, please let me know. If not, feel free to move on to the next lecture, which is on transfer acceleration.